let's finish off September requests, which piled into October for undisclosed reasons, with a video game review. Night Trap was released in 1992 for the experimental Sega CD. At the time, it was quite controversial for reasons that are probably silly today, and since then, it's remained a cult favorite among gamers and fans of the genre. It had full motion video and a goofy B-movie plot, and in order to play it, I need a Sega CD, but to play a Sega CD, I need to own a Sega CD. But I could also just get the 25th anniversary edition that was released on the PS4 in the last couple years. So let's take a look at the one and only Night Trap. The first time I heard of this game was from the Angry Video Game Nerd episode for the Sega CD. Since then, it's always intrigued me since it had a pretty controversial history. Night Trap is about a special agent squad attempting to save a group of girls at a slumber party, which is being held at some fine estate winery. But it's actually a decoy house filled with traps and controls to turn everyone into vampires. These characters, known as augurs, waltz through the house like zombies because the actors themselves had to prepare for the potential stunt work on the on-screen traps, and they're dressed up like special operatives themselves. Honestly, maybe they should have chosen a different color costume here, because I never quite know what they're supposed to be. I guess it makes for a surprise when you discover they're vampires. But they don't really act like normal vampires. In fact, they extract blood from victims with this oddly shaped vaudeville hook. This was a decision made by Hasbro to lessen the violence of the game, so there's no teeth going into necks or other attacks, even though, in the end, Hasbro didn't release it. This has a very strange history, but video game developers from Atari began working on prototype technology to create an interactive movie experience. Though it started out as a game titled Scene of the Crime, which was about a cash robbery, things eventually evolved into Night Trap, which had vampires. How things de-evolved that much, who knows? I'd love to be a fly on the wall for these story meetings. The film was originally shot in 1987 with unknown director James Riley and director of photography Don Burgess, who became quite notable in Hollywood years later. The late Dana Plato also starred in the game, who you might know from Different Strokes. But just before it was going to be released on the now titled system ControlVision, it was cancelled. This was at a time when the video game industry was in a boom, with so many different add-ons and separate systems and companies, so it was no doubt that it eventually see the light of day. 5 years later, on the Sega CD. Video games often go through prolonged production, but it's not often that movie footage goes this long before making a release. When I was playing, it really felt like something from the cheesy direct-to-VHS era of the late 80s, only to discover that it's exactly the market it was made for, but it feels out of place in 1992. I can see why this was requested. I'm not against video game reviews, but this kind of qualifies as a movie. It has a filmed introduction with the commander of the Sega Control Attack Team. Subtle. He explains the objectives, and you, the player, are supposed to take over the cameras as SCAT, their beautiful acronym, hijacks the house controls. There's the Martin family and all the girls dressed in pretty unsubtle attire, but you're not really given the chance to know them because you need to hop between cameras and trap the augurs. There's a timer since the gameplay technically only lasts 30-some minutes, and you're tasked to capture about 100 augurs that are tallied for you. Meanwhile, you need to flip through various colors that are said on screen by the actors. The colors are random, so you can never rely on previous knowledge for that, but the camera patterns are always the same. It's also cool that the PS4 version has the color change on the controller itself. Gotta love that system integration. It was pretty confusing to figure out at first, but eventually you figure out that there's really only 3 checkpoints and 3 different times the colors change, roughly. You also don't need to capture all the augurs. There's only a handful that will cause a game over, plus the additional Martin family characters. There's also times that the game will trick you. There's a flashing marker in the middle of the screen that indicates when to set a trap, but sometimes you end up trapping one of the victims and you lose. It's not my fault that the game lied. There's a pretty easy pattern to learn, and by the time you get to the 15-minute mark, you will only keep going back to the same checkpoint until you finish the game, which has various endings depending on who you save. It's a pretty odd and experimental game for its time. There's trial and error, but eventually you get a hang of things and you can beat it. However, my only issue is that you don't really get a chance to take in the cutscenes. The point is that some of the scenes are meant to be distracting, so you don't notice the other augurs in the house, and they're certainly trying to appeal to the 80s mindset of dancing girls in bras and nightgowns. This is where most of the controversy came from. Congressional hearings in 1993 about video games brought these scenes up as promotion for violence against women. Honestly, if you compare it to so many other movies and especially games nowadays, it's almost ridiculous just how slow-paced and tacky it all is that this ended up in a congressional hearing. When the ESRB was created, this was a mature rating, which has since then been downgraded to a teen rating for the PS4 version. So things have changed since the 90s, but nonetheless, I still don't ever get a grasp on the story since I'm focusing on catching the augurs. You don't want the footage to distract from the ultimate goal, but then you don't really get to treat this like a movie, or other choose-your-own-adventure films like Black Mirror Bandersnatch. Luckily for the re-release, which features the original port of the game as well as the updated PS4 version, they have a theater mode that allows you to watch everything in real time. It contains all the important scenes without having to worry about the gameplay. And you know what? It's cheesy, it's a B-movie, and honestly, it's pretty forgettable. When I think about other great games where I get invested in the story like Grand Theft Auto 5 or the 2018 Spider-Man, I think it's just better for a video game to have straightforward cutscenes rather than continuously playing footage that is almost unnecessary unless a villain appears. I can't deny that Night Trap is important to video games as far as its legacy for controversial games and its ingenuity. It'd actually be kind of fun if someone else made something similar to this game, but possibly lessening the gameplay. I know that sounds crazy, because it's a video game, and this game already has pretty simple mechanics, but with so many different rooms to bounce between and so many pointless enemies that really only account towards a scoreboard that is for your personal self, it doesn't make for a very cinematic experience. I guess it depends on what you really want. Do you want more invigorating gameplay with a story in the background that you don't need to pay attention to much? Or do you want more invigorating story that makes for a cinematic style of gameplay where the gamer becomes more of a viewer? I guess it depends on what you want from a game, but personally, I'd rather watch Night Trap just as a movie, maybe like a choose-your-own-adventure thing that they've done on Netflix. Night Trap was probably ahead of its time, and it's a style of game that I think could actually be developed a little further, and certainly they probably have developed it further. I might not know. It'd be great if there's some other examples out there that you can let me know about. But otherwise, if someone's willing to do it, they should try something different with this style. Special thanks to Anthony for this Patreon request. Thanks for watching the video, and special shout out to Anthony, Anna, Kirsten, Lucas, Ryan, and Robert for the support on Patreon. By joining my Patreon, you can get exclusive videos and blogs, and for only $7, you can request your own movie review. I hope you stick around, cinephile, and have a happy, productive day.